Hey, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome back to the Alpine Mountain Zoo. It's mid-September now, and the sun is still shining here in the mountains. Our Wiesen are enjoying their temporary home, and it looks like we might have some babies on the way soon as well. Today, we're going to be creating a sunlit clearing in the forest and building our first proper habitat for raccoons and skunks. We have a lot to do in the zoo today. Before we get to building our first proper habitat, we need to create something really important, the first area that the guests will come to when they enter the zoo. Normally on this channel, we always have an entrance plaza for our guests, but in this zoo, I want to do something different. I'll explain that in a second, but first of all, let's get some paths in. I mentioned in the last episode that I want to keep as much of the natural terrain on this map as possible, so we need to grid paths over all of this sloping terrain here. If you find that the game won't let you place down a gridded path, if you deselect the grid and then reselect it on the neighbouring piece of path, you should be able to place the path down. Sometimes you'll get tiny gaps, but you can always cover that up with plaster, or in this case just soil because we're using the bark chipping path. We also have quite a height variation between the entrance and the area where we want the guests to get to, so we're going to use the transport trick to create a smooth slope going down to that. We'll just put it in, make sure you've got tunneling turned on so it creates terrain under the tracks, and then once you've got it down to where you need it to go, you can just delete all the tracks that you've placed in and you'll be left with the terrain that it's created in a nice smooth gradient that you can choose. Shouldn't be any more than 5 degrees if you want it to be realistic and match how real zoos and public areas are made. And then we can just use the flatten to surface tool and the smooth tool to start building out the terrain from there, so that we can get a path down it, and we'll join that up with some of the gridded path that we just created. So what is the plan for this area then? This zoo is going to be absolutely filled with trees, and I want the first area that the guests get to be a clearing in the forest. It's going to provide all the things that we need at the entrance that the plaza normally does for us, i.e. a large open space where guests can congregate and arrange to meet people, but it's going to be much more natural looking than it would be normally. The trees are going to go right up to the entrance, so we'll start adding them in here, just selecting them from the plant palette that we created last week, and then we're going to get loads of Yorkshire foggrass, different flowers and shrubs and things like that, just to really fill this in and make it feel like the forest that the zoo has been built in. I really enjoy building natural scenery like this. It's nice to get this into a zoo rather than separating it out into one of our Planet Wild episodes. Normally our zoos are very heavy on the concrete, so this one is going to be very different to what we usually do. It's all about just experimenting with the exact placement of each tree to try and make it look realistic and also attractive. At this stage in the zoo's development, where the background is a whole load of boxes signifying where habitats are going to go, I'm going really heavy on the planting to try and block out the views so that all our beautiful cinematics at the end of the videos look good. And then as we build the zoo, as each habitat goes in, we'll be looking at the planting around the zoo and removing trees to open up views into different parts of the zoo, so we get beautiful vistas as we walk through the zoo and different things are revealed. We've got space for one more tree here, and we're going to use this giant cedar. You don't actually get this type of cedar in the Alps, but if you sink it down into the ground, it fits in nicely, and it's a big part of my plans to transform the zoo for autumn and winter as well. With the planting done, we're going to run some rocks down each side of the path to join the path nicely onto all the vegetation. We're going to use the smallest of the faux rocks and have random rotate all on, and then we can just plop each one of these down here along the path, nice and simple. They'll all look completely different, and we'll join all of them up into one group as well. Once we've done both sides of the path, we can then just sink them down so they're just poking out above the terrain. And then we'll do the same thing again with the largest of the small faux rocks for a bit of variety. And that's the paths and the first part of the planting done. Now we can move on to a little centerpiece that I want in this area of the zoo to act as a landmark where people can meet and just to have something interesting looking for people to see as they come through those entrance gates. This is one of the custom alpine trees we made last week, and we're just going to surround this with statues of some of the animals that we're going to be seeing in this zoo, and then we're going to use a mud pillar to spin a load of faux rocks around the base of the tree and this piece of mulch that we've got here to create a nice display, like a giant planter that the tree is growing in. So we'll get a fairly random arrangement of these rocks to get that kind of dry stone wall look, and then we can spin it around the mud pillar, and once they're all joined up, we'll take a slice and replicate it on top, and there we go, really nice natural looking pile of rocks. We'll just fill that in with some plants, put some strangler fig roots in the bottom. This looks really nice, but it's just missing one thing. I think it'd be really cute to have a bird box on the tree. We'll have a few of these around the zoo just to encourage native birds to come around here. Got to give a shout out to Iben from the Bro Nation Discord, who actually met at a Pairi Daiza last week. I saw a little bird box in a video that he made recently, and I loved the idea, so I thought we could make one ourselves to put in our zoo. This is almost entirely made from just one piece, the Indonesian stained timber beam cap, which is a really useful piece because it's one of the smallest bits of wood in the game. And then we're just going to use a full stop to create the little hole that the birds go through, and hinge number 2 to add some screws or nails in where the box is fitted together. And that's pretty much it, but I think it looks really cute up on that tree. There's a few more bits that we're going to add later, but that is our forest clearing pretty much done. And now we can move on to this area here and build our first habitat. I have been planning this zoo for weeks, and the one thing that has given me the most trouble is the first habitat that the guests will come to in the zoo, and I'll tell you why in a second, but let's just explain what we're doing here. What we need to build is a fence that basically does 3 things. It is a fence to keep the guests out of the habitat. It is a path to follow the crazy slope that we've got going on here. And it also needs to form an unclimbable barrier on the inside to keep our raccoons in. They are one of nature's great escape artists, and you need to design their habitats very carefully. So we're building the fence part of it here, and then we're going to extend it out one way with a path for the guests, which will join up to the actual path that we've got there, and we will extend it downwards on the other side using the backs of these doors that you can see here, which have a really nice metal texture, which is completely flat so the raccoons wouldn't be able to climb it. And then we'll measure down along this slope to make sure we can maintain the almost 3 meters of height that you need to keep raccoons in. And while we do that, I'll tell you about my struggles with this habitat. Normally, we like to start our zoos with birds. We had king penguins at Tecton Zoo, flamingos and red-crowned cranes at San Bernardino Zoo, and African penguins at Belmont Zoo. But with this zoo being a place for animals that live in and amongst mountains, we kind of ran out of birds. The only really suitable birds were the red-crowned crane, and having used those at San Bernardino Zoo, I didn't want to repeat myself. So I've been going back and forth between red-crowned cranes or maybe some other kind of animal, but I could never come up with something that I was completely happy with. This, however, I am completely happy with. We've got a fence, a path, and barriers all perfectly following the line of this slope going down towards the next part of the zoo. We'll build a shelter for the animals next, and I'll tell you how I solved the problem of this habitat. Last week, I went to Pairi Daiza in Belgium, which, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the most impressive zoos in Europe. And alongside all the amazing animals that I saw in the zoo that I've never seen before, I saw one of the cutest habitats I've ever seen, and I knew that it would be absolutely perfect for the beginning of this zoo because it contains 2 animals that you can often find in and around mountains, the raccoon and the striped skunk. I counted, I think, 10 raccoons in this habitat, along with a pair of skunks. It was really action-packed, amazing to watch. I spent a very long time there. And whilst this isn't an exact recreation, we're going to be building something very close to what they have at Pairi Daiza here. With this zoo being halfway up a mountain, shelter for the animals is going to be really important. So what we're building here is a modular shelter. I've built different areas on the grid, and whenever we need a shelter for smaller animals, we'll be able to combine these elements together to build one that looks nice really quickly. I've popped the grid up into our little work area at the top of the map so that we can return to it, and now we can move on to decorating the interior of the habitat and getting it ready for our animals. This is a little hatch that will get the skunks and raccoons from the habitat into their shelter. I built it slightly larger than I wanted, assuming we were going to have to make it even bigger when I put the animals in, but to my surprise, when I did put the animals in, they actually fit straight through it. And now we're going to start turning this big pile of dirt into something attractive for our entrance animals. One of the most important things for entrance animals in a zoo is that they are active. You want the first thing that the guests see to be something that is either cute, beautiful, or both, and something that is going to be either moving around or making a lot of noise or both, which is why flamingos and penguins are such a popular choice. But with their crazy antics, raccoons are a great choice for an entrance animal as well, I think, and the equally cute skunks really complement them. Raccoons are famous for washing their food in the water before they eat it, so we're going to give them some water to do that here. I've just raised the terrain up to the water level, put one of the rustic floors in to give us some stones at the base, and then done something similar to what we did with the paths in the entrance area to sit this water into the landscape, with some foliage and some of the rock terrain paint. Along with some natural rocks, we can tie this all in very nicely. One of the things that we need to achieve with this habitat is to make the terrain look a lot more interesting. Despite being mountainous, this is actually a temperate map, which means the dirt texture is what you see here. It's pretty decent. It does look like mud, but it doesn't really have any variety to it. The real habitat is a mixture of mud, wood chippings, little sticks, Basically every inch of ground has got something different going on, unlike what we have here. So throughout this build, we're going to be adding twigs, sticks, logs, rocks, fallen leaves, decals, all sorts of stuff to the ground to make it look more interesting. And when you see the cinematics at the end, hopefully we've achieved that. Now we're working on a climbing frame. So this is something that I saw at the real habitat. There was a couple of raccoons sat on here while their friends were scurrying about on the floor. Super cute. It's at the eye level of the guests, which is one of the reasons that the habitat itself is recessed into the ground, so that when the raccoons are climbing, they're at your eye level. Most of the pieces I found that I wanted to use for this were too big, so it's basically going to be almost entirely custom made from planks, aside from one of the Arctic roofs that we've got on the top. These East Asian planks are climbable, so we can use these to create the base that the raccoons can get up to from the logs that they're going to climb up here on. We'll just get everything shifted about and make sure it's the right scale for the raccoons and the right height for the guests, and then we'll use this little step ladder to get our raccoons up here. There are also some cute little shelters, almost like kennels, on the floor for the animals, so we'll build one of those as well. We're using the Twilight door panels to make this. It's such a good piece for making any small wooden item. We just need to build one side, copy it over to the other side, and then we'll use one of the conservation slats to tidy it all up and give it a more recognizable front. And then we can just copy that same thing to the back, and we are done. Let's take a quick look at it. Looking good. The raccoons at Pairi Daiza seem to enjoy these, and if you're enjoying this video, then don't forget to hit the like button. Now, I mentioned that raccoons are great escape artists, so even the door to the habitat has to be very carefully constructed. So what we're building here is a 2-level door system. One of the doors will be the actual habitat gate, and then one of them will be implied. So what we're going to do is extend the null barriers outwards to make a little square and move the habitat gate back to the end of what we've just created, so we can make a little kind of airlock system, and then in front of that will be an implied door. This is close enough to the habitat gate that the keepers will be able to walk straight through it, because they don't have any collision detection until they're, I don't know, I think it's 3 meters into the habitat or something like that. We'll fill this little box in with mesh, and then we'll finish this door off with some hot wire. So we're going to be using string, and one of the tiny little bells from the Asia Animal Pack, which has a little kind of ring on the end. We'll use that to make it look like the hot wire is actually attached to the door, and recolor the string. And we've got something very close to the real habitat there. Then we'll get on to the enrichment items. We want to encourage the raccoons into the water as much as possible, so I've put one of the little water jets there. We'll put an ice block on the other side of the habitat to make sure they're crisscrossing it, and then I'm putting cardboard boxes on all the climbing frames as well to encourage them to go up there. It's not just going to be that one little kind of hut for them to climb in, there's going to be climbing all over the habitat, so we'll build another one here. Although the raccoons are very good at climbing in this game, the skunks can't climb at all, so we're going to have some ramps to get them up onto some of the climbing as well, so they can just walk up here, join their raccoon friends. We'll fix it all together using this little block of wood from the America's Animal Pack and hinge number 1, and then we'll put some of the ladders from the Tropical Pack, I think these are from. They're so good. They don't actually have a function, the animals can't climb them in the game, but they look amazing, so we'll put some of these in along with the stuff the animals actually can climb, just to make everything look nicer. There was also a cute little swing for the raccoons in the habitat, which I really liked, so we're going to recreate that with one of the bits of African wood and some rope. And then we'll attach this to the climbing frame. Obviously they won't be using this, but it looks really cool, and it's not something that we've built before, so I thought we could definitely put that in. You can see how much better the ground of the habitat looks now as well, with all the clutter that we've added to it. And that's the habitat complete. Before we take a look at it, we've just got one more thing to build today, which is very important, the new Explorers Club monolith. I thought for this zoo we'd return to the original bronze look of the monolith that we had at San Bernardino Zoo, but with a different design. So I'm going to build one that actually goes along the path right in this first area of the zoo, so it's nice and visible. It's going to be at 3 different heights. We'll make it with our favourite piece in the game as usual, along with a few others, and then we can put the names of all the amazing members of the Explorers Club on it, and as always we can see it completed at the end of the episode. I've also created a new set of directional signs for the zoo, and that is week 2 of the Alpine Mountain Zoo completed. Let's take a look at it. Just look how many raccoons we have in here. They are so cute. We have 8, along with a pair of skunks, slightly less than Pairi Daiza, but this is the most I could get, keeping them green for welfare, of course. Let's take a look at our male using the water feature that we built. I love the animations on this. All the climbing in this habitat worked first time, which blew my mind, and like I say, both the raccoons and the skunks can use their little hatches to get in and out of their shelter. This little skunk's going to go for a sleep, and we're going to take a look at the zoo so far. The trees make such a massive difference to the look of the zoo. Next week, we're going to begin the Himalayan Pass. Thank you so much for watching. As always, thank you especially to those of you who've joined the Explorers Club, and I'll see you again next week for some more Planet Zoo. Bye.